Have you ever witnessed strange lights in the sky or experienced missing time? If so, you're not alone. These high strangeness incidents happen to people every day, all over the world, and we want to get to the bottom of them. Since 1969, MUFON has been at the forefront of UFO investigations, and we're not stopping now. Join Alex and Ruben, a team of highly skilled MUFON field investigators with years of experience, committed to getting to the truth. We'll investigate UFO events through guest interviews and witness accounts, analyzing data from various sources. Let's work together to unravel the mysteries of the unknown and get answers to the questions that have been unanswered for so long.
Hello and welcome to another episode of MUFON Up Close. I am your host, Alex Tusia, and joined with my co-host, Ruben Uriarte.
Hey, Alex, thank you.
How are you doing, Ruben?
We're back. Good. I'm looking forward to our upcoming speaker that we have on for the show, and been keeping busy with. I've actually had a speaking engagement with a group a couple of weeks ago, and starting to get back into the swing of things. So I'm real fascinated with what's been happening in Washington. I believe David Gresh, he was a whistleblower that spoke at the congressional hearings, I believe in 2023. He's now got an appointment, or he's working as a staffer, either for one of the congressmen there, and so that's interesting that he's back in, and sounds like there's going to be a lot more happening.
Yeah, it's nice to see these whistleblowers are, kind of staying in the public's eye. They didn't just kind of give their statement and disappear like some whistleblowers do. It leads some hope that other whistleblowers might come out, seeing that these people do come out, tell their story, and everything's okay. Hopefully, that leads the path for more people to do the same.
Yes. And you, Alex, you've been pretty busy with the African cases, right?
Yeah, a lot of good cases lately in Africa. Some ERT cases even. So you get a good mix of not just lights in the sky, but people actually interacting with beings and having some really interesting encounters. So it's been nothing short of fascinating in Africa. I've
been getting cases from Mexico, primarily. People that are going on cruises, especially. I got a great video that this one witness submitted of an orb that really was really weird, but he got good footage of it. And then it seems like a lot of activity along the Gulf of Mexico, Gulf of California as well, and so I'm getting backlogged, so I got to finish up some cases there.
The water cases are always interesting. I wish that we had more cases from cruise ships, because they're in such unique locations, whether it's out in the middle of the water, there's nothing around them. Just really good, good witness statements to get.
Exactly, and they have all the time in the world to film something out of the ordinary. Yeah. So I've gotten some very good cases over the last several years from people on cruises, which I might try one myself.
You might have to now, right?
Yeah.
Well, we are excited to bring in Jim Myers. Jim has an extremely varied background. He grew up in Kenya from the age of 11 until he graduated from high school. Then after graduating from college, Jim spent another 20 years as an adult living in West Africa and France. Jim is fluent in French and is conversational in Swahili and Wolof, the Western African trade language. Jim has been fortunate to have traveled to over 45 countries during his career, and he enjoys bringing this wealth of experience into everything he does. The Myers returned to the U.S. in 2009, at which time Jim was able to begin pursuing his interests in Sasquatch. For the past 13 years, Jim has been an avid Sasquatch researcher and public speaker on all things related to the Sasquatch Forest People. He and his wife, Daphne, built the Sasquatch Outpost with the goal of becoming Sasquatch Central for the Western U.S. The outpost houses both an extensive gift shop as well as being the home of the Sasquatch Encounter Discovery Museum, created with the goal in mind of educating the public from the existence and behavior of these elusive creatures. To date, the outpost has had over 90,000 visitors from over 60 countries since its beginning in 2013. Far from being an armchair expert on this topic, Jim tries to spend as much time as possible in the forests and mountains of Colorado, where he has gained a great deal of experience and accumulated extensive data over the years. In addition to the Sasquatch Outpost, Jim started a company called Rabbit Hole Adventures for his hiking, camping, and horseback expeditions. Jim and his wife Daphne make their home in the town of Bailey, Colorado, in the Front Range of the Rocky Mountains here in Colorado. Thank you for joining us, Jim.
Thank you, Alex and Ruben, for having me on the show.
It's great to have you here, Jim. I had the pleasure of meeting you when you and David Politis and your organizing committee put together a conference. The theme was Bigfoot and UFOs, and that was awesome experience for me because I had a chance to interact with a number of Bigfoot researchers and some really interesting things that I'm looking forward to sharing with you and get your comments on. But that was awesome experience. Thank you, Jim.
Well, you're welcome. Actually, we had Scott Carpenter at that conference, who's now passed away, unfortunately. But he was one of the more prominent Bigfoot speakers at that time.
Jim, we'd love to hear, how did you get into the, researching Bigfoot and, doing all that you do?
Good question. If you had asked me 15 years ago, if I would imagine doing what I'm doing today, I would have said, you're out of your mind. There's no way. And although I had an interest in Sasquatch, just a personal interest in their, whether they were a reality or not, I think I have to go back almost, to 1972 when the movie The Legend of Boggy Creek first hit the theaters. I don't know if you guys have ever seen that movie or heard of it. It was really the first docudrama about Sasquatch, and it was based in the town of Fouke, Arkansas. Based on true stories, many of the actors were the people who had the encounters. It was not a big Hollywood production, but scared the bejesus out of me as a 10-year-old. And that got me thinking back then. Even though they never called it Bigfoot or Sasquatch, Sasquatch, neither of those terms were being used very much in 72, but they called it the Fouke monster. But it was a Sasquatch. That was the origin of the story, and it was a series of stories of people who had encounters in and around that town. But that got me thinking about what could be out there. Fast forward, moved overseas. Of course, there was no internet back then, and the only way I could do any research was whatever happened to be in my school library, which there wasn't much on Bigfoot back then. So when we moved to Colorado in 2009, I really started pursuing this. And in 2012, we took over the building that now houses our store and museum and soon to be our escape room. And it took us about 9 months. This building that we're in was built in 1878. Wow. And it's not only old, it was in terrible condition. It took us about 9 months to renovate the building to where we could open as a business. It had been boarded up for about 5 years. And during those 9 months, a couple of key things happened. One, I met my first eyewitness, and it was a woman who at that time was running a lodge here in Bailey. She was a professional woman, very competent, very credible. She had no reason to lie to me about anything that she told me. In fact, she had every reason not to tell me. And she didn't really like telling people because she was afraid it was going to affect her career. And the stigma back then was still pretty strong about, talking about this topic. And so we got together for coffee, and she told me her story, and it happened just behind where she was working. And which is about, from where I'm here in my home, it's about 20 minutes away, but only about 2 miles from the outpost. And so very much in the middle of Bailey. And she had this encounter. She and her best friend were out for a walk in May of that year. And it was still daylight. It was evening. A Sasquatch ran down a hill kind of adjacent to them after stepping on a dead branch to make a noise so they would look, because they were kind of looking down as they were walking. So it ran down the hill. They both saw it. So daytime double person sighting. The chances of mistaken identity are virtually nil in those kind of situations. And so they both agreed on what they had seen. Funnily enough, one of them, I forget which one it was, after this Sasquatch ran down the hill, it was bent over, swinging its arms as it ran. Didn't look at them. It just ran past, maybe 200 feet away. And they both stood there for a minute in silence. And then one of them said, "Was that a deer?" And they both knew it wasn't a deer. But she said, "What do you say when something like that happens?" And the other one said, "No, that wasn't a deer. I think that was a Bigfoot." And they agreed that they weren't going to tell anybody what happened, right? As they were walking back to where Kate lived, a car came by and happened to be some friends of theirs. And of course, the first thing you do is talk about this thing they had just seen. and it's hard not to when something like that happens. If you think you're going to have an audience of someone who actually will listen to you and not mock you. And so anyway, she told me this story, and that was all it took for me. I mean, I had never actually met someone who had seen one, and she convinced me immediately. Now, I wanted to be convinced, obviously, but there was nothing in her story that would make me think she was lying or that she was hallucinating or anything. And then shortly after that, probably 2 or 3 months after that, the Animal Planet show Finding Bigfoot came to Bailey to do a Colorado episode. And they always would start with a town hall meeting. And so Kate, I think, told me about this meeting, and I went there, and there was like 110 people there. And I never saw any advertising for this meeting anywhere. And I'm thinking, where do these people come from? And there was maybe 8 or 10 people out of that group that stood up to tell a story about seeing a Bigfoot somewhere in the greater Bailey area, and certainly in Colorado. And I was fascinated by that this was clearly not a one-off thing. This was happening to people all over the place around here. And so we made a decision the store we were going to open was going to be a grocery store mercantile, which we did open that, and it was called Bailey Country Store. But we added Bailey Country Store and Sasquatch Outpost, because I thought, if there's that many people having sightings, I'll bet you people are going to come in and talk to us. And sure enough, they did. And after a couple of years, we realized that we could not make a living being a mom and pop grocery store, because we were the only ones eating the food. And that's not why you have a grocery store. And we had a critical moment where we had to make a decision. Are we going to go? And by this time, the Bigfoot theme had really grown, and more people had come in. And so we had to make a decision. Do we go with the groceries, or do we go with Bigfoot? And we obviously went with Bigfoot, and the rest is history. And what happened after that became the Sasquatch Outpost, and then the museum, and then everything else that we're doing. So never could have imagined that you could actually make a living, doing Bigfoot research. And most researchers I know don't make their living doing this. It's something they do on the side because they have another job. But this is our job, and I love it. I wake up every morning excited about what may happen next.
Wow.
Very
That's
cool.
amazing, Jim. Congratulations
Well, thanks.
on following your passion there.
Yeah.
I was wondering, I was going to ask you that your connection with David Paulides on Missing 411, how did that occur?
Well, it's a funny story, actually. So David used to live about 30 minutes from here in a town called Morrison. Now, I didn't know who David was. I had heard of Missing 411 somewhere along the way. And my wife told me one day, hey, this guy called named David, wants to meet with you. I didn't know who he was. I blew him off. And then he called again. And I thought, I guess I'm going to have to meet with this guy to get him to stop calling. So he came up and we had lunch at the diner next to my store. And we had been talking for about 30 minutes. And I asked him, so have you ever heard about this book called Missing 411? And there was this pause and Dave goes, yeah, I wrote it. So I said, can we go 30 minutes back in the conversation and start all over again? Because I'm an idiot. And I just had never put two and two together that that's who I was meeting with. And so funny way to meet someone, but we became friends and ended up, getting out in the woods together a lot because he lived so close and organizing several conferences, one of which Ruben came to as a speaker. And we're still good friends. He's since moved to Montana, and I got to spend some time with him a couple summers ago. Went fishing with him for a week with my wife, and but that's how that came about. And Dave today is probably the preeminent expert on missing people in the country that I know of.
Yes, I had the opportunity to be on his documentary that he put together on Missing 411 and UFOs, the UFO connection.
Yeah, I remember that.
And that was, I was involved in the case where I was with Washington State MUFON, assisting them with as an interpreter when we had witnesses that observed an elk being picked up by an object.
And if I remember that story, that the elk got picked up, and then as it moved away, it ran into a tree.
Yeah.
Like the UFO miscalculated the height and hit the tree, and then kind of went and kept going. That's the one thing I remember about that story. But great movie. I really enjoyed that movie that Dave made.
Yeah. What do you think is the connection? What's your opinion, Jim? Is there a connection between UFOs and Bigfoot?
I think so. And in fact, I don't know how you cannot, if you've been doing this very long, research Sasquatch, I don't see how you can't come to that conclusion. And the reason being, there are so many stories that either someone has a Bigfoot encounter and then experiences a UFO, sees a UFO, or vice versa. But in very close proximity, Bigfoot and the UFO will be together, or, there's obviously stories of people who, possible abductees who say they've seen a Sasquatch on a ship, things like that. But I know with Sasquatch, and I've experienced this many times, orbs seem to congregate around Sasquatch. And when we know Sasquatch are around, we tend to see orbs a lot. And I can't explain that. I'm not even sure what the orbs are, if they're sentient, if they're like a drone or something. But we've literally taken pictures of, I'll be out in the woods with a group of people, and we'll take a picture and we'll see one orb in the picture, and we know there's a Sasquatch near where we are in those situations. And then we'll change the exposure, and there's hundreds of orbs around us. And that only happens, in my experience, that only happens when a Sasquatch is nearby, when we've seen eye glow already or soon after that. But I can't explain what that relationship is. I just know that they are, and we've been out on trips on horseback before, way out camping, and had a UFO experience as a group in the evening, and then things would happen that night where Sasquatch would be in or around the camp. And so, yeah, I mean, I made a decision, Ruben, early on, that in my research, that I was going to follow my research wherever it led me. And I made a very conscious decision not to read a lot of what other people had written about Bigfoot when I first began doing research, because I really wanted to see what I could discern or discover on my own. And that's taken me in some very interesting directions, but that I didn't expect. But I just decided I'm just going to follow the evidence where it leads. And it led to these kind of encounters, that Bigfoot and orbs, Bigfoot and UFO, there's a relationship. I can't explain it, but there's some kind of a relationship.
Yeah.
When you met with David, what did he want to talk to you about?
Bigfoot. I mean, at that time, Dave was, now he's very much, aligning himself with the Bigfoot topic. He did not initially, because he did not want to be known. He did not want people to think that he thought that Bigfoot was responsible for all these missing people. Mm-hmm. Because he didn't think that. And still he doesn't. But since that time, over the ensuing 10 years or so, 12 years since I met Dave, he has very seriously gotten into the Bigfoot topic, and has had his Bigfoot 101 series on the internet. Is working on a project right now that I probably can't talk about, but it'll be known soon on this topic of Bigfoot. So that's what he wanted to talk about. Plus, he was just curious why we had the museum, why we started. We were so close. I think he just thought, and I don't remember how he even heard about me, to be honest, but he brought me his cardboard bound series of 3 books that he had at that time. I think he's got a dozen now, but he had, all 3 of his original books put in a kind of a binder, and he brought me that as a gift. But yeah, that's what we talked about that day. And when we would go out looking together in the woods, he was very fascinated with the topic of Bigfoot. Dave definitely, from the time I met him, believed in Bigfoot, believed that they were real, and has only grown in that conviction over the years.
Is there a lot of people that go missing in your part of Colorado?
There are people that go missing. I would say they are not, my personal opinion, it's not, Bigfoot is not the culprit. I have different opinions about what actually happens to these people. I've had I've gotten to know some people who are either psychic or mediums, who've become personal friends who I trust. And I don't say that about every person that claims to be a psychic or a medium, but these couple of people are people I trust, and they have an idea or sense that there's other forces at work that cause people to disappear. But I wouldn't say that Bigfoot never was a source of someone disappearing, but the more I get to know about Bigfoot, the less I think they are involved, because I don't think that's their intent. If it were their intent, and we can talk about this some more if you want, but if it were their intent to harm us or kill us or abduct us. You'd be hearing about this all the time,
Mhm.
and we just don't. And of all the researchers I know across the country, and I know many researchers who I take scores of people out every summer. I've taken hundreds and hundreds of people into the woods, camping, hiking. I've been in the woods hundreds of times with all of my researcher friends. It's in the thousands of people, and never has anyone disappeared. And you would think if it was going to happen to someone, it would happen to those of us who are out in the woods the most at night, and it just doesn't happen. Now, I've been scared, very scared many times, as many researchers I know, but that didn't mean that was the intent of the Sasquatch in that situation. It was my own fear, my own insecurities that led to that fear. And that has changed over the years, certainly. But yeah, so long answer to that question. But
Jim, have you actually had your own sighting experience with Bigfoot?
I have. I've had one daytime sighting, and I've had more experiences at night than I can count anymore. But the daytime one happened, I think, in 2014. There's a very popular lake about 13, 14 miles from here called Wellington Lake. It's a man-made lake, beautiful setting, and surrounded by mountains, and it has a big rock mountain at one end called the Castle. And over the years, we've probably had 20 reports from just that one area, because there's so many people there in the summertime that are either hearing things at night or are actually seeing Sasquatch. So we went camping in 2014 because it was is such a hot spot. And it was funny because the night, we only spent one night there, and there was noise about 11 o'clock at night. That night there was some noise in the campsite, and my wife had Bigfoot on the mind, obviously. And so she yells out, "Who is that?" And I unzipped and looked out, and it was a bear. I had left some baked beans in the pan, and the bear was interested in that. And then I said, as soon as he saw me unzip, I said to my wife out loud, "It's okay, it's a bear." And two of my daughters and one of their friends were all in one tent with their feet sticking out. And it was like the Wizard of Oz. As soon as I said the word bear, all these feet went zip inside the tent, tent zipped down, and the bear took off. But I asked my wife, "Did you think he was going to answer you, even if it was Sasquatch? Do you think he was going to answer you like, it's me?" But so the next morning I got up really early. I'm a avid fly fisherman, so I took my gear down to the lake. Nobody was awake in the campsite that I could see at 6 a.m. So a lot of people camped, but nobody was up and around. So I was fishing, and again, this lake is ringed with these thickly wooded mountains, and where I was fishing was kind of at the very end of the lake, one end of the lake, and maybe 150, 200 yards above me was a big rock outcropping, which after this event, I climbed up there, and it was so steep. I was on hands and knees literally to get up to this rock outcropping.
Wow.
But once you got up to it, it was it went back quite a ways. I mean, it was a much bigger area than it looked like from below. But knowing now what I knew about that area, it was not camper that I saw. So anyway, I just cast my fly, and I was looking around, and I looked up, and there was this enormous, tall, uniformly colored being standing up there at the edge of this rock, looking down. Not necessarily, I didn't get the sense it was looking at me, but it was looking down below towards the lake. And I saw it, and I immediately thought, that's a Sasquatch. and just because of the size, I mean, it was enormous.
Wow.
And as fate would have it, right at that moment, a fish grabbed my fly. And so I took a fateful decision. I took my attention away from the Sasquatch to look at my fly. I mean, 2 seconds, maybe 3 seconds at most. And then I realized what I was doing, and I looked back, and it was gone. I mean, it just was gone. It disappeared.
Wow.
And it was so big. Had it ducked down or been running, I would have seen it if it was running away or ducking down. It just was there, and then it was gone. And
Wow.
so that was the only daytime sighting I've had. At night, I've had them around my tent numerous times at night, pushing on the tent. I often sleep in a hammock, and I've had them messing with the hammock and walking around it at night. And
Wow.
and their eyes glow in the dark. This is one of the paranormal things about Sasquatch. Literally, they glow. They emit light from their eyes. Again, I cannot explain it, but I've seen it probably 15 times now at night.
What color?
I've seen white, orange, and red.
Mm-hmm.
And I've heard other researchers say, well, red is always a male. I couldn't tell you, but I've seen various colors. And sometimes it's so intense, the light is so intense that on one occasion I was on a friend's property here in Colorado. I thought it was somebody's porch light I was looking at in the woods, and it wasn't. It was a Sasquatch, but that there was so much light that I thought it was a porch light and that I was looking at. And when I got out my night vision binoculars and zoomed in, it was two eyes, and it was fast. I mean, it would look around. It knew exactly where we were. It was 1:30 in the morning. And when it would look straight at me, I could see the pupil in the eye. And then it would look away and look around, and then it would look straight at me again. I could see the pupil again. So how do they emit light from their eyes? I cannot tell you, but I'm 100% sure they do. So I've seen that many times now at night, and I've learned to look for that, as particularly at night, as an indication that they're around and they're watching us. And you don't always see it. I've had them around me at night and didn't see that, but so I believe they can somehow turn that off and on when they want to. But I have recordings of this that are phenomenal, and it looks like a bunch of flashlights in the woods. I mean, it's that bright. So.
Wow. That's amazing, Jim. And I mean, if that was me, I know I would be scared, very scared. And did that, you mentioned that you were scared a few times?
Yeah, I mean, the second time, well, the first time I saw the eye glow, I used to call it eye shine, which is not what it is, because it's not a reflected light like you will have with a deer or a raccoon or something else. When you shine a light on their eyes, there's a membrane on the back of their eye that reflects back. Humans' eyes will not reflect at night like these animals, nor do the great apes. Their eyes don't reflect. But most wildlife, they do. So that's reflected light as opposed to emitted light. All right. So, but the first time I saw it, I had taken a couple out who first time they had been out. I took them to a location that I'd never been to, but I knew where it was. I had looked at it on Google Earth. It's generally not a good idea to take people out to a place you've never been to at night, especially if you've never been there in the day. So we had to climb up a very steep hill to get up to this location. And we got part of the way up the hill, and it was so steep, we stopped to rest. And I had an oak axe handle with me. And so I, just being stupid, I hit a tree, and immediately from across the road from where It was like bam, and then 3 seconds later, bam, across the road. And I thought, wow, I've never had that happen. And I told this couple, that's crazy. So we caught our breath, hiked some more up the hill, stopped again to rest. And now I thought, let's see what happens again. Bam, bam, again from the other side of the road. This is about 10 o'clock at night. There's nobody out in the woods at 10 o'clock at night.
Oh,
There were no cars. There was nobody else around. This is not a place that people would go at night. It's not, there's no trail. We were totally off trail. So again, twice now. And I said to this couple, don't think this happens every time I go out. I said, this never happens. So
wow.
I had an idea they were around. We got to the top of the hill. We sat down and we were looking into an area called Lost Creek Wilderness. And this is just miles and miles of nothing. It's a true wilderness area. And we were right on the edge of it, looking towards the wilderness. And we sat there for quite a while. And I started seeing a pinprick of light through the trees, and I kept watching and thinking my eyes were fooling me or something. And after a little while, I asked this couple, do you see anything over there? And the guy says, yeah, there's a light. It must be a campfire back there. I said, maybe, but I don't think there's anybody camped there. And in the daytime, when I went back to that location where we were kind of on the crest of one hill. If I went 50 yards, it dropped into a deep ravine and then straight up to another hill. And that other hill was all you could see. It was very steep hill. So there was no way anybody had a campfire on the side of that hill. All right. So I said, I don't think so, but I wasn't going to criticize him. So as I'm watching, I see more than one light. And then the guy goes, what the? I said, what? And he goes, that light's moving. I said, yeah, I told you I didn't think it was a fire. And so these two lights moved and separated and eventually were on either side of us. At that time, being the first time I saw this, I thought, we're being flanked. I said, let's now I didn't say this to them, but I said, hey, why don't we just head back to the truck? And the interesting thing was I was totally confused about where we were because I turned around to go back to my truck, I thought. And when I got out my GPS, we hiked for a little ways. When I got out my GPS and looked, we were going further into the wilderness. And I said, that's weird. And I asked the guy, do you have a GPS? He goes, yeah. And I said, are we going towards the truck or away from the truck? He said, no, we're going away from the truck. I thought that's what you wanted to do. So I got totally turned around and good reason why to take a GPS with you. And so we turned around. So I was fearful at that point. I thought, we're being flanked. I don't know what these creatures are going to do. I don't think I had a weapon on me that time. And so we started heading back the correct direction towards the truck. And we got to the edge of the hill that we had climbed up, and there were two lights. There was a light down below us. Again, looked like a flashlight. And as we climbed down and I turned around and looked back, there were two lights at the top of the hill behind us. And so they were watching us leave. And so that time I was quite fearful. Another time, probably the first time I had experience camping, I was with one other guy in an area called also Lost Creek Wilderness, but the other side of that wilderness area. And we were on a trail called the Goose Creek, and others were going to join us, but that night it was just he and I and his two dogs. So we set up our camp, put our tents up, built our fire, had some dinner, and we went to bed. We were right on the edge of this creek, and the creek was fairly loud at that point. And I'm in a we're backpacking in, so I'm not in a big tent. It's a small tent, and I had a thermal attachment. You can buy an attachment for an iPhone that snaps on the bottom of the iPhone that turns your iPhone into a thermal imager, a rudimentary one, but still decent. So about 3 a.m. So I had put some lights, battery operated lights in a tree, maybe 20 yards from my tent. His tent was on one side of me. The lights were in the tree. And these lights, you could push a button on it and change, if you wanted all the lights green or all the lights blue or multicolored. They were kind of a Christmas light. So I had all the lights green, and I left it that way. And I remember waking up and I could see the green lights over there, and I fell asleep, and I woke up and the lights were blue. And I remember thinking, didn't I put that on green? That was really strange. And then about 3 a.m., Jason and I were both awake, and we heard something cross the stream on 2 feet, 2 legs. It was very clear, sploosh, sploosh, sploosh. And I thought, and something threw a rock into the stream. You could hear it land, boosh, and I thought, what is that? And so I heard it come across, and then right after it got across the creek, the lights in the tree turned off. Now, to turn those lights on and off, you have to push a button. I mean, it's a little control unit, and you have to push the button to turn them off. The lights went off. So, and then his dog on the other side of the tent, his dog started growling, one of his dogs. And I thought, okay, something's going on outside. I don't know what it is. I wasn't about to go out of my tent, but so I'm lying there, and I get out my thermal attachment. I put it on, and I've got this video where I'm filming the inside of my tent. Now, I thought maybe the thermal could see outside the tent. They can't, I've since learned. But so I'm filming, just kind of the inside of my tent, and I'm looking around. It's pitch black, and didn't realize this at the time. Only realized this the next morning when I showed this video to Jason. He goes, wait, back up. What was that? And as I'm kind of circling, looking around the inside of the tent, there's a shadow of a hand pushing on the tent and going down this way and then going back. And you can see the shadow of something pushing on the tent.
Wow.
And you can actually hear the nylon. Now bears, if a bear came into the camp, generally they're going to avoid us because they don't like humans. And a bear may sniff around, but they're not going to push their nose on the tent. And this was clearly a hand going back and forth. And so I was very frightened because I thought the only thing separating me from whatever's outside my tent is this little thin nylon layer, and we get this false sense of security inside these tents. I love watching these videos on YouTube where it says the 6 most frightening camping encounters ever. And there's like 50 of the 6 most frightening, but people feel secure inside their tent, but tent is nothing. I mean, a tent is just a thin piece of nylon. So anyway, I'm lying in my sleeping bag and thinking, if something wants to come in this tent, it's coming in this tent. There's no way they won't come in. And I've realized over the years that they don't want to do that. If they did, they would have come in long before now. But they do enjoy messing with me and messing with the tent, throwing stuff at the tent, walking around. So that experience frightened me a lot, because even though Jason was next to me in his tent with his 2 dogs, at that moment, you're in your tent by yourself. All right, whatever happens. You're by yourself. It's not like being totally by yourself in the woods, which I've been, but for all intents and purposes, he's in his tent, I'm in my tent. and we don't generally talk to each other at night when something's going on. We just wait till the morning and say, "Did you hear what I heard last night?" So I'm actually writing a book. I hope I can finish it one day. It will be called Alone with Bigfoot. And many of those alone times, there were other people in the camp, but I was alone in my tent or alone in my hammock. And no one else knew what I was experiencing. I didn't know what they were experiencing. So, but my fears have changed over the years. I would say I'm not afraid anymore at night. I get very excited when I hear things outside the tent, or when we're hiking. If I hear something, walking with us in the woods, because I've learned how they behave and what to expect, and they generally follow those rules. I mean, they are consistent with their own. They don't generally do things that are totally out of the ordinary, or could happen any day. It could happen, but I'm not as frightened as I when I first went out. I think the first 2 times I went out with other guys at night, I made sure I was not the last one in line, and I thought if they're going to grab anyone, it's going to be the last guy. And so I always maneuvered so I was in the middle and there was somebody behind. I never said anything to the other guys. They probably thought, why is Jim always kind of, jostling to get in the middle? So, yeah, I was definitely afraid early on, but I think needlessly, probably, because they've never done anything like that.
Would you say that generally, are people having would you consider Bigfoot to be like a friendly being? Is he more curious? How would you describe kind of the interactions that people have with him?
I would say they are definitely curious, friendly, even though if they want us to move away from where we are, they have very, very clear ways of making that happen.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of their vocalizations can seem terrifying, and they're so loud that it, I've heard people describe it as it reverberates in your chest. And it's like, we used to have a racetrack, a 1/4-mile straight drag track near here called Bandamere Speedway. And a few times I was there, and they would have these vehicles that were fueled by nitrous. And when those things would take off, if you didn't have hearing protection, you would go deaf, but you could feel it in your chest. It was like boom, 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 boom. It was so loud. And that's what people describe with Sasquatch. It's so loud that they feel it in their body as much as they're hearing it. When people hear that, they generally leave. I mean, it's like, I'm not sticking around to find out what that was. Mm-hmm. But most, in fact, I think, I'm trying to think of a time when they intentionally tried to scare us away. But generally my encounters with them are generally quiet. I'll hear things moving through the forest. When we stop, it stops. When we move, it moves. It's classic behavior that they do with many people. But I've never had a bluff charge. I've heard of other people saying that they had something. I had some guys come in our store one time who were from Pennsylvania, I think, and they talked about being out looking for Sasquatch. They were all armed, 6 guys, I think. And at one point, they heard something rushing them through the woods. They said it sounded like a rhinoceros charging, and they all raised their weapons. They all had lights, and the lead guy at one time, right when this thing was on them, said, "Light it up," and they turned on their lights, and they were ready to fire. And all there was a mist that just kind of dissipated.
Wow.
And so, who wouldn't be afraid at a time like that when something like that was charging you? But I've never had that happen, nor have I ever been zapped. We use this term. I don't know if you've ever heard of this, being zapped or being sizzled, or we think they're doing it with infrasound. But it's when you're in the woods and you can have a whole group of people, and this happens to one person in the group, where someone becomes either completely disoriented, where they don't know where they are or how they got where they are, and it may last seconds or a few minutes, and then it kind of goes away, or one person in the group has this overwhelming sense of dread and terror, and they'll say, "We need to leave here right now," and everyone else is like, "Why? What are you talking about?" But they cannot stay. So I think they target certain people, however they're doing it, through infrasound or some other means, and so that sense of dread, like, if I stay here, I'm going to die, and you just know it in your bones that you're going to die, and so people generally don't ignore that; they will go. But my experiences have all been, even though I've been very, very frightened, I looking back on those situations, I don't think that was their intent. It was my emotional reaction to what I was experiencing. Mm-hmm. And I don't feel the same way now when the same things happen. And so, I think, Alex, generally they are, in their interactions with us, they are benevolent, curious. If they wanted us out of that area, there are many ways they could make sure that happened. Mm-hmm. And I've heard many stories of other people having those things happen. It just never happened to me so far.
Gotcha. So that makes sense. I guess one more question before we take us into break here. You're talking about, like you hit the tree with a stick in your hand, and then the Bigfoot, signals back. Is the implication that the Bigfoot's also carrying around a stick, or is he just hitting it with his hand, do you think?
Great question. I cannot imagine Sasquatch walking around with sticks, mm-hmm. just in case somebody hits a tree. Nor do I think it's likely that, every time I have knocked and had a reply, the reply came within 3 seconds.
Yeah.
So the time to look around and find a stick, and most of the times that I find sticks in Colorado on the ground, they're rotten. You hit a tree and it just kind of goes and just obliterates.
Yeah, especially with their strength too. You imagine that, they'd probably just be crushing branches all over the place.
So I think either they're using their hand or they're doing it vocally somehow. I've been out in the woods and I've told my wife, I'll go up ahead of her on the trail and then I'll go something like this. And I'll say, what did you hear? And she said, "You just knocked something." I said, "No, I did that with my hands in front of my mouth." So it's possible that they even have air sacs similar to what orangutans or howler monkeys have, or some other anatomical way that they enables them to make a loud knock sound. But I honestly don't believe they're walking around with sticks waiting for someone to knock. So some other way. They do it some other way.
Good. Well, that answers at least one question that I had. I was picturing, picturing what they may have been carrying around.
No. Yeah, I have Sasquatch. He's got two big sticks. No. I think they must have some other way to do it. And they, when you hear knocks in different directions, I think they're all using the same means for making that noise.
Yeah, just some way of communicating.
Yeah.
Well, Jim, we're going to take a quick break, but we'll be right back.
Great.
All right. Great, Jim.
Hey members, the new KGRA DB app is now available on iOS and Android devices. Gain on-demand access to any KGRA DB programming. download any show directly to your mobile device to listen or watch on the go. Go to the App Store and search KGRA DB.
The experiencer phenomenon is happening for a lot of people just like you all over the world. People are telling very similar stories about personal encounters with non-human intelligence. The Mutual UFO Network has research, resources, and support to help you make sense of what is happening. Our experiencer community is growing every day. Join MUFON, find your friends.
You're listening to the KGRA Digital Broadcasting Network. We provide unparalleled coverage of trending news in the world of ufology, cryptozoology, and paranormal phenomenon. Whether you're watching our video live stream or listening to one of our audio programs, you are getting the best from world-renowned researchers and hosts, guiding you through topics the mainstream won't touch. Miss one of your favorite programs? No problem. Head over to the members area at kgradb.com for access to our massive library of award-winning content. Make contact, stay connected, only at kgradb.com.
And we're back. Just coming out of the break, we want to give a shout out to MUFON for putting on this presentation, KGRA for having us on, and Chanel for being our great producer.
Absolutely. Jim, I have a quick question.
Yes.
That fascinated me when I was at the at your conference. There was maybe the video footage came from you or was from another researcher, but they showed through on infrared. There was a looked like there was a mound, several mounds, and there was like the head of the Bigfoot was above the mound slightly and was moving up or moving down. I think there was a lady that was feeding them pancakes, and I don't know about that footage. And then the other extraordinary one that caught my eye was a Bigfoot walking, and his gait looked like that of a human, but it had long arms, and I was just, wow, that was very, very impressive. But do you remember that?
I do. In fact, both of those videos were from the same location. It was from a area in rural Kentucky where there was an habituation situation where a family had been feeding the Bigfoot for many years, 2 generations, and the Dennis Full was the one who showed those videos. Dennis was part of what now is known as the Erickson Project, which Adrian Erickson was the businessman who funded that, made that possible for that research to happen, because they actually purchased the home in rural Kentucky, which was in farmland. It was not in the middle of the wilderness. There were farms all around this area, but there were these deep ravines. The farmhouses were all on kind of the ridges on top of these hollows, what they call hollows or hollers in Kentucky. And the Sasquatch would move around down in these hollows. And so this family had been feeding them, and they pancakes or other things, they would put food out. And on that occasion, the Sasquatch was Yeah, you could see it was behind a haystack. Actually, you could see the head come up above and then go down below, and then the pancakes. The pancakes were on kind of a stump, and the hand came up and took them. Which many people could say, well, that's all good and fine, but that was clearly a person behind there imitating a Sasquatch or whatever. I trust the people who were there, who were doing the research and filming this, and I don't think they were faking anything. But they came away, including with some incredible footage, including the one of that Sasquatch walking away through the woods, kind of with the green hue night vision, which they had at the time. And but they had quite a few experiences on that location. In fact, Sibylla Irwin, the co-host of my past and soon to be podcast again, she spent 5 years there and had many experiences.
Really?
Of with the Sasquatch, having them around. But that was the Kentucky location.
Yeah, that was amazing footage.
Yeah, it was.
Is it on YouTube or can
there's some of that's been out there long enough that if you were to type into Google or on YouTube Erickson Project, I think that footage has been out there more or less public domain, but it's far from being all of. There's a very famous video of a sleeping Sasquatch where you just see this big furry thing on daytime, lying on the ground. The shot is being taken behind some bushes, but you can see this thing lying on the ground. You can see the breathing. That was the same project. There's also another video of a juvenile Sasquatch. They gave the name Matilda to, female, that where you see the profile of her face. She got her mouth open.
Oh yes.
It was very hot, panting in the summertime. She turns towards the camera. Now she looks like Chewbacca, and so a lot of people said, "Oh, that's just a Chewbacca mask." And the reason that is not a Chewbacca mask is one. So the couple who had been feeding these Sasquatch, this is rural Kentucky, kind of a, for lack of a better term, I don't want to be unkind, but redneck hillbilly couple could not have created a suit that looked like this sleeping Sasquatch or Matilda, the juvenile Sasquatch. And so it was too sophisticated. There were too many things about that image, such as that you would have to know, like the breathing rate of the sleeping Sasquatch was significantly slower than a human would have been lying there in a suit breathing. Well, how would you know to slow your breathing down in order to imitate a Sasquatch? You wouldn't.
Right.
And Matilda, on her face, her mouth is open, which gives people the idea that, it's a mask, but it was hot and she was panting. She's covered in hair, but you can see on her, I believe her lower canines, you can see the lower canines and you can see the upper gap where the canines fit when she closed her mouth. Well, you would have to know a lot to create a suit that would actually have that detail in it, where you can see the gap and the tooth, where the tooth would fill in that gap. All predators have the same gaps where their canine, when they close their mouth, the canines fit into a gap in their gums. Otherwise, they wouldn't be able to close their mouths. And so, those two you could find online. Different people have put them out there now. So, but there's other footage that has not been seen, that for different reasons they chose not to put on and make public. And so, but those are two that I know for sure you can find on YouTube.
Is there any footage out there, Jim, that really knocked your socks off, if for lack of a better word?
The classic is the Patterson-Gimlin footage from 1967, filmed at Bluff Creek, California. I believe it's 100% genuine. There's a lot of reasons why I believe that, but and since it's since 1967, thousands of people. It's probably one of, if not the most viewed video clip in the world. I mean, this thing has been viewed by millions of people and by thousands who have tried to prove or disprove that it's real. And there's just too many things about this video that make it impossible for it to be a human in a suit, even though there are people who say, I was the one in the suit. All right. Why someone would do that when it was a lie, I don't know. But the people who claim that, one guy in particular, I think he's 5'11", Patty's, the Sasquatch we call Patty now, the female, they know her height, approximate height, because of triangulation with objects in that section of the forest that were still there many years later, and her height was estimated to be between 7'3" and 7'6".
No.
Well, for a 5'11" man to be in a suit, you would have to have arm extensions, leg extensions.
Mm-hmm.
She did not walk
the walk right if you had,
she would not have the correct walk, and her walk, what we now, and that's the Patterson-Gimlin film, is where you get this classic sideways looking back, that you see everywhere, the silhouette. That came from that video where she was walking away. She turned to look back at the two cowboys. They were using a manual wind up 16 millimeter projector, and which is interesting because I'm convinced that in order to capture images of Sasquatch, my opinion is we're going to have to go backwards in technology, not forwards. Mm-hmm. We're going to have to go back to using mechanical cameras that did not emit anything, didn't emit infrared, didn't emit any electronic signal. You wound them up, you let them roll until they wound down, then you would wind them up again. That's what the Patterson-Gimlin was filmed with. And so, when these two guys came, they were looking for Bigfoot, which is why a lot of people think it was fake, but they had been out on horseback for a month looking. They hadn't seen anything. And they came to Bluff Creek. I think the smell of the horses masked their smell. The creek sound masked their sound. But when the Sasquatch realized they were there, she stood up and then didn't run, but just walked away from them and took that one look back. She had breasts. I mean, if you're going to make a suit, why do you make a suit with breasts on? It's so much more difficult to do that. Breasts that bounce and move with her. You can see the musculature under the skin moving. So in 1967, we just did not have technology to build a suit like that. Impossible. Even Planet of the Apes didn't even come close. If you remember in Planet of the Apes, the only parts that you ever saw were the head and the hands and the feet, because they could not build a suit that was convincing full body. And so that's all they could make was a head and hands and feet. And so that's the most convincing footage. Another piece of footage I believe is genuine was filmed in Idaho by a guy named Tim Wells. He's a well-known bow hunter, has a lot of videos out there of bow hunting. and he and his friend Eric were hunting. They had been out. They came back tired. They were going to sit down and have some lunch. I think they said they were, in the video, it says this, but maybe 8 miles away from the nearest road. They were 8 miles in. And you see something. Eric starts filming. He sees something he thinks is a bear initially, but you see this thing standing maybe 30, 40 yards away from them, behind some bushes, watching them, very tall, standing next to a tree, and it's just watching them. And as soon as they realize it, and Eric's filming, Tim turns to Eric and grabs the camera. Give me the camera. And at that point, the film stops, because Eric maybe had 5 seconds of video of the Sasquatch, but you can see as soon as the Sasquatch realized that they were onto it, it turned and ran, and they gave chase, but they said it was running so fast through the woods, there was no chance of ever getting another video. But it was just watching them. It was standing there watching them, hoping maybe they wouldn't notice. But that one, I believe, is genuine, just because why would this guy create a Bigfoot video? He's a bow hunter, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Why are you going to create a video that's going to make you lose credibility, or make people think, well, you're nuts, I'm not going to watch your videos anymore? So again, every reason not to show that video ever, because people are going to mock you. The third one I'll mention, and there's many out there. There's a lot of footage out there that is claimed to be Bigfoot. Much of it, I think, is faked, and it's a hoax. But you have to know what to look for to determine, is this possibly a real footage? But there was a footage came out of Russia of, I think it was a father and son hiking in the winter. They have a video camera. It's like so many of these YouTube programs where you see people film, like, look, here's this person in their house filming, and you see a ghost one, and you're thinking, why are you filming nothing? You're sitting there filming your living room, not knowing that this ghost is going to come by. So anyway, they were filming, they're out in the woods, and you see this huge creature go leaping, maybe 50, 60 yards ahead of them, leaping through the field of view with its arms up. It's an incredible video. Enormous creature leaping across and then leaping again, and then it's gone. But just the size of it, if you were in a suit doing what this thing is doing, I mean, it was taking these huge leaps. You couldn't do it in a suit. In fact, I don't think a person could leap like that. So there are quite a few pieces of video that are typically very short, 1 second, 2 seconds, 3 seconds, where you'll see something. Often people are filming somebody else, and something crosses behind in the tree line that they only notice later. They weren't planning to film it, but something crossed behind them. So that's typically how people get them. Or crossing a road at night and they catch it on a dash cam, something like that. So, but I believe there's a lot of genuine footage, but there's a lot of people in gorilla suits as well. And so, you have to really study this stuff. And I think knowing the person who is putting that video online helps, because there's people that are just not going to fake stuff. I mean, there's too much writing for their reputation and everything. But you have to be discerning in what you can see on YouTube.
I remember also at that conference, Les Stroud, the gentleman that plays Survivor Man, and he saw in one of his episodes, I think he had a gentleman by the name of Todd. I don't remember the last name.
Todd Standing, yeah. He did a series called Survivor Man Bigfoot.
Yeah, and there was footage of two separate footages. Two separate um, videos of a face. You could see the Bigfoot creatures
Yeah.
like behind some bushes and
Yeah.
staring, and they're really close up, and that was freaky. But I was wondering what's your thoughts about that?
I get asked that a lot. Now, I know of Todd. I have never personally met Todd. I'm sure I will one of these days, but you know, he's a controversial person in the Bigfoot world for a number of reasons. Those pictures being the primary reason why he's controversial, because when you have one person that has two close-up videos of a Sasquatch face in perfect focus and detail, high resolution. One person has two of these and nobody else has anything remotely like it. Then it could lead you to say, well, how is it possible that this one guy has these two videos that are so convincing? And I think many people are convinced today that those are not genuine. Now, there's a rumor out there that Todd's sister or sister-in-law or something is a professional makeup artist. If that is true, and I've never validated that, if that were true, that would give some credence to the fact that this may not be a real video, that she created two faces, hairy with a mouth that moves or whatever, but very clear. If that's true that she's a professional makeup artist, maybe they could have created something. But again, for Todd to do that, you run the risk of people finding out one way or the other that you faked this, and then your reputation is shot. Because are either of you familiar with a guy named Rick Dyer? Rick Dyer made some claims early on, years and years ago, that he had a body of a Sasquatch in a freezer at his house.
Yes.
And so it shows the lid of the freezer open. It's lying on the ground. The freezer is. You can see there's something lying in there covered in ice. It looks like a Sasquatch. Well, it turns out that was a rubber Sasquatch suit in a frozen thing, a fridge full of frozen water. And when it became known that it was a hoax, Rick lost all kinds of credibility. Well, then he did it again, and he built this Sasquatch that was a figure lying on a flat surface that he says he shot and killed. And by this time, I was a bit leery, and so I've never well, I can't say for sure about any of this imagery, but I think for someone to be able to film something, again, that nobody else has ever filmed, lends itself to being seen as being a fake. And so now that doesn't mean that as we get more and more people in the woods with high def, iPhones, and people ask me all the time, how come if we all have these, extremely high resolution iPhones that can take photos, we don't get more pictures of Bigfoot? And here's how I answer them. Go out in the woods sometime with your iPhone in your pocket. Nobody walks around the woods, filming everything. Mm-hmm. You don't have enough memory for that anyway. But if you see a bear up ahead of you on the trail, you have to be able to, and you have to time yourself trying this. Take your phone out of your pocket, turn it on, get to the camera app, get it on, lift it up, and get it pointed in the right direction. By that time, whatever it was that was there is gone. And so as soon as it's aware that you are looking at it, a bear, let alone an intelligent being like a Sasquatch, is not just going to stand around and wait. Okay, you got your camera up. Okay, now let's do this. They're going to be gone because I believe they know what a camera is versus what, say, a sound recorder is. And so they will avoid getting in front of a camera at all cost. And you just don't see them on game cameras because they are too smart and they know what to look for. So they just don't go in front of those images.
What are your thoughts? I've heard a couple of theories that, Bigfoot and Sasquatch, they might be interdimensional beings, and that could explain why, there's never been a body found, or, it's hard to find them out there in the forest. What are your thoughts on that theory?
Well, again, I said from the beginning that I was going to follow my research wherever it led. My research has led me very clearly into the direction that Sasquatch seems to have an ability to appear or disappear apparently at will. The sighting I had where the Sasquatch was there and then it was gone. Literally 2 to 3 seconds later, it was just gone. I have friends who have been looking at a Sasquatch through binoculars. I mean, they're watching the Sasquatch through binoculars. It stands up. It's in the shade during the daytime. It starts to walk away from them at a distance of maybe 80 yards. It's a sunny day, but the Sasquatch, when they first see it, it's in shadow, and it gets up and it starts to walk towards a sunlit area in the woods. And the person who was watching this on with binoculars thinks to themselves, you're kidding me that this Sasquatch is going to walk right into the sunlight where it's so obvious. And right as it got to the edge of the shadow, they said, I have no reason to doubt this person. They've never lied to me that I'm aware of. They said it just pixelated, went and disappeared right in front of their eyes. So the person with the binoculars is looking, trying to figure out what happened to that. And then a second Sasquatch steps out from behind a tree, enormous, even bigger than the first one. It said it was a very windy day. The hair was blowing. It looked straight at, now this guy was with his wife and 2 of his grandkids. Looked straight at them, then looked around some more and looked straight at them again and stepped back behind the tree. And my friend said he was afraid it was going to come and kill them. So he said to his wife and grandkids, you go back down the trail towards the vehicle. I'm going to stay here and run interference. And he's thinking to himself, whatever that was that came out from behind that tree is so humongous. I mean, massive. If it decided to come here, it's going to cross that distance of 80 yards in about 5 seconds. And my friend is a big guy. He said, there would have been nothing I could have done. But I still said to my wife and grandkids, go on down the trail. Don't run. Just walk back towards the truck. And he's thinking, and often when he tells this story, he starts weeping because he says he realizes there was nothing he could do. If it came, there will be nothing he could do to stop it from killing him or them. But he thought, I have to try. And so obviously it never did follow them. But the point of that story is the one disappeared as it was being watched. I've heard that over and over and over, that they seem to have this ability to either cloak, meaning they're there, they just have gone invisible to what our eyes can see, or they moved into another dimension. And I couldn't say which. What I can say with a good level of confidence is they do disappear. Now, where they go, I couldn't tell you. How long do they go for? I couldn't tell you. But they seem to have an ability to go from one dimension into the other, go from a reality that we can see, or that our physical eyes can see, into a reality that we cannot. And vision is an interesting phenomenon, because for instance, you look at something that's a certain color and you ask, what color is that? And everyone says, well, that's yellow. Well, visually, what I'm seeing is yellow. You may be seeing is red, but we grow up being taught that color is called yellow, whether you're seeing the same color as I am or not. And so vision is basically your brain interpreting the data coming in through your eyes and making it make sense to itself, to the brain. And so people are seeing things all the time, seeing things disappear or appear. And so I am convinced, I think you asked the question, Alex, I can't remember.
Yeah.
I'm convinced that they do have this ability to move in and out of our visual spectrum, where we can see them and then we don't see them. And so where they go, I can't tell you, but I know that visually they go from being visible to being invisible, which explains a lot. It would explain how come we don't see them more than we do, because they're probably sitting right there and have chosen either, I mean, you can imagine at least a couple of ways that could happen. Either they manipulate their own cellular structure so that they can become invisible, or they manipulate what your eyes are interpreting to your brain, and they're fooling your eyes, even though they're still standing there in front of you. They're fooling your brain to believing there's nothing there. So I couldn't tell you which it is, but yes, I think that they seem to move in and out of dimensions, and I think many people ask me, what does it mean when I see this or this? I see this kind of tree structure or whatever. And I'll typically say, I don't know, but I don't think it's for us. It's between them. It's between clans of Sasquatch families. This means something. I think they understand. We don't know what the heck that means when a tree is made into an arch or whatever. I don't know what it means.
Yeah.
Probably never will, but they know what it means between them.
Have you heard from a witness, describing seeing Bigfoot, but seeing it in its cloaked state? Like,
Yeah.
I had a witness who they reported it as a UFO or like an alien encounter of some kind, but they're out in the woods here in Colorado, and they describe it like in the movie Predator, where if it's standing still, you can't see it, but as soon as it moves, you can see that it's kind of like the outline of it. You can see that there's something's not quite right. So I had somebody describe that kind of feeling where they are in the woods, they hear the tree snap, and they look around and they see, just for a second, they see this kind of a shield, if you will. And then
they can see something is there, but
yeah. Is that something that you hear as well?
I have not experienced. Well, I can't say I haven't experienced it. Yes, I have several friends who have been in the woods, have seen or heard something moving up ahead of them, close enough that they should be able to see it, and then they notice there's this one area in front of them where the light is kind of shimmering, as opposed to what's around it, which is still. And so they can. And I'm thinking of one case in particular where she said I could see in this one, next to this one tree, there was this shimmer, and then all of a sudden that shimmer moved and stayed in the same shape, and so the whole thing moved. And she said at that point, she said, I'm out. I'm whatever that is, I'm not sticking around to find out. And so, but yes, many people have described this, for lack of a better term, predator effect. Of, their ability to cloak, where it's just kind of a shimmer. I've seen something was it daytime? I think. Yeah, we were hiking in daytime. I had two friends with me. We were hiking up a drainage. I was the first one. The other two guys were behind me. And I look up ahead and I see I see something moving through the trees right at the edge of my field of view. And I can tell it's got color on it. And so I can see that up ahead. So I turned to my two friends and I said, "Hey, there's some hikers up here." Then I turned back and look ahead and I don't see them. So I yelled, "Hey, who is that?" No answer. And I'm so convinced that I saw something. There was definitely something moving through the trees. I'm so convinced that I saw something. I start getting mad because I'm thinking they're hiding from me. Why would they do that? So I quickly ran over the ridge to the next drainage. And I think I'll see them here. There's nothing there. Run over the next one. There's nothing there. And now I got mad and I'm like, "Why are you hiding from me? What reason do you have to hide?" Well, obviously nothing ever answered me, but what I did see was movement and some color moving behind these trees. That's all I could tell you with a clear conviction.
Mm-hmm.
I can't say it was a Sasquatch, but there was something up ahead that made me think we were about to come into a campsite, and there was nothing there when we got there. So
There's a segment in one of David Politis' books called "The Hunters and the Hunted," and there is a one of the chapters was a bow and arrow hunter. She happens to be the wife of Bruce Maccabee. Bruce Maccabee is leading UFO. Well, he worked with the Navy, but he was a researcher. But his wife was a hunter. She was also forget what you call it, Jim. It's a platform that's attached to the tree for hunters to climb into, and they observe like a lookout point.
The tree stand.
Yeah, and then she described the very similar that she saw something going from tree to tree.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And this thing was also, as you mentioned, predator effect. It reminded her of that this thing was cloaked, but she could actually see the image.
She could hear movement, and she could kind of see something fuzzy moving through the trees.
Yeah, exactly. That's
yeah,
amazing.
that's exactly what we're talking about. And she even took a picture.
Yeah.
She took a picture of like what she could see straight in front of her, of branches and leaves, and then she took another picture right after that, and it's all just fuzz of color.
Mm-hmm.
and completely ill-defined and everything. And the thinking is the second one was when whatever it was cloaked was moving through that space, and it made everything go blurry. Mm-hmm. And so, but yeah, she said I could see the branches and the leaves moving, but there was nothing there except the shimmer that went from tree to tree, mm-hmm. which would be terrifying. I mean, I'm thinking if I watched it, I'd be thinking, even if you weren't thinking predator, you're thinking, what is that?
Yeah.
And is it coming after me?
Yeah. Absolutely.
Now you have your rabbit hole adventures.
Yeah.
We'd love to hear more about that and the kind of trips you're taking people on.
So we do several types of trips. The simplest trip we do is a night hike where I'll meet people at my physical store location at the outpost, maybe 6:37 in the evening. We'll do kind of an orientation, and then we'll drive to a location within 30 minutes of here, and we'll go out and hike for about 5 hours from 7 till about midnight, and just hope that we hear something, we see the eye glow or have something happen. Then we just have camping trips where we'll take my truck and another truck maybe, And everything we do camping wise is all inclusive. So we provide the tents, the beds, the cots, the food, everything. The price you pay includes everything you're going to need except for your clothing and any gear you may want to bring, so that people can travel light, because they know that when they get to the campsite, everything else is going to be there.
Nice.
Then the horseback trip's the same thing. We will bring a pack horse. We'll carry any heavy stuff on the pack horse, and we just ask the hikers or the riders to have a backpack, a small backpack with a few things in it that they can use the day of the ride. But again, all inclusive. And then we'll do, the last thing we may do some of the summer is a hiking trip where we're going to carry the heavy luggage on a pack horse, so that those who are hiking don't have to have all this 80 pounds of weight on their back.
Mm-hmm.
They can hike in with 20 pounds, which is doable for anybody. So it's a lot of different kinds of trips, but we get interest from all over the world. I know I have a British guy flying in this summer to go camping, people from many different states who are going to be driving here or flying here. So they've become very popular, and people have had enough encounters now that they're writing reviews, and they're saying things like, well, I was total skeptic when I went on this camping trip, but so many things happened that I could not explain. And the easiest explanation that brings all these different things together is that Sasquatch is real, and they were in our camp last night. But I was telling you guys before we started the show this evening that I do have occasionally people who freak out. I try to do a good job of orienting everyone to what are the next 2-3 days going to look like, how we're going to behave, how we're going to look for Bigfoot, and to tell them that if something happens, if something comes to your tent, whatever the case, you can relax. I've done this for years. They've never hurt me. They've never hurt anyone with me. But even though you tell people that, you never know what's going to happen until you actually have something standing outside your tent, pushing on the tent. And then whatever your reaction is going to be is what it is. And I've had people yell, go away, or even women yelling, don't rape me. And I'm like, oh my gosh. And here's the thing about Sasquatch I found is that when one person in the group is overwhelmed with abject terror and you telling them to go away, they'll go away, which has the real impact of nobody else gets to have an encounter after that, because one person's fear has caused them to move back, because that's not why they came into camp, was to scare us to death. And so when they realize, this is my interpretation, obviously, when they realize that someone is completely out of their minds with fear, they pull back and stop it coming into camp. But until something happens, now, the day I see one face to face, I may pee my pants. I don't know, but you just never know until something happens the first time.
Yeah.
What you're going to react to, what your reaction is going to be like.
Jim, with all the programs that have been shown on Bigfoot and that, do you think the stigma of Bigfoot is changing? How do you have you noticed any change of attitude?
Yeah, definitely. The stigma about talking about your experience has changed. I mean, you can go on TV anytime and even without typing in Bigfoot, just look at, like, on YouTube or any of the direct TV or whatever, look at all the programs that are on at that moment. There is always going to be 2 or 3 programs related to Bigfoot, documentaries, movies that are on any time of day and night. That's significant. Now, unfortunately, a lot of these shows are showing Bigfoot inaccurately, or they're wanting to make a horror film with Bigfoot as the chief slasher in the movie. And so, it's terrifying. The people go out in the woods. It's a classic story. A bunch of teenagers go out in the woods to have sex in a cabin, and they all get eaten but one, and that's just not the way Sasquatch is. That's not their intentions towards us. But that's largely how any movie about them portrays them, is bloodthirsty, cannibalistic, whatever.
Harry and the Hendersons. I feel like that's probably the most
Harry and the
positive.
Hendersons being the prime exception to that, and it's still one of the best. Did you know in the 80s, that movie was made in early 80s, I'd say. That costume cost over $1 million. That was a ton of money in the 80s.
It was a good looking costume.
It is. And they had an animatronic. A lot of times when you're looking at just the face, when he's making all these facial expressions, that was an animatronic fake face. But they did have a guy who was 7 foot something that actually wore the suit.
Mm-hmm.
And, but great movie. I think portrays Bigfoot pretty accurately. So when people ask me, so what movie do you recommend? I'll say just what you said, Harry and the Hendersons. And they always say, if they have kids, they're always like, oh, we know that movie. I said, well, that's a good one. And The Legend of Boggy Creek is a good example. It's dated. It looks very 70-ish, but still the stories in there, I believe, are true. Mm-hmm. And the people who had the experiences are the ones telling those stories.
Mm-hmm. I actually didn't know that. I feel like that makes it even more of an interesting movie that they went with, no-name people and just the people that actually had the experience. Really makes it a different kind of experience.
And they're not the greatest actors in the world, because they're not actors. They're people who live in the town. So if they seem a little stilted, it's because they were. They don't know how to act. So, but you're right, Alex. It does give a little more credibility to the movie, because they could have gone and hired a bunch of Hollywood actors. They didn't. They chose to go with the people who for the most part, the people who had the experiences.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I think there's another program out there just recently. May have the title wrong, but Sasquatch Sunset.
Yeah.
It talks about a family of Bigfoots traveling, and have you seen that?
Yes, it's an hour and a half of pooping, peeing, copulating, farting, and it's like I'm watching this and I'm thinking, really? I mean, what was your intention in making this? Because it's literally all about pooping, peeing, and mating Sasquatches, and it's like, and every stigma you can imagine, every false idea about Bigfoot is portrayed in that movie, where they're all knocking the trees together in unison, ding, 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 and so somebody told me when the movie came out, oh, I knew about your store because they show the Sasquatch Outpost in this movie at the end. Well, they don't. It's someplace else that they're showing. It's not. If they showed my outpost, that would have been phenomenal, because I would have gotten tons of people coming as visitors. But no, it wasn't the outpost. It was another Bigfoot museum or something that they showed in there. I can't remember which one. But yeah, personally, I can only take so much, all these noises.
Right.
And to me, it was a travesty of portraying what Bigfoot is like, because it was just the way people like to imagine them. I don't think that's the way they are. And it was, I'm sure it was made to be a comedy. It ended up, being that, but I didn't finish it. I got partway through it and I thought, forget this. And I was done. I never saw the ending. So,
Wow. The other quick question I wanted to ask you was, as far as Bigfoot organizations, and I'm relating to my experience with MUFON and other UFO groups, that there seems it's getting better, but before there was a lot of politics.
still is.
Is that something going on within the Bigfoot
Yes,
research community?
very much so. And the Bigfoot world is very divided, largely between those who would say Sasquatch is an undiscovered great ape, and those who would say, which is the camp I would place myself in, that Sasquatch is a hominid. They're a type of people, and they're not at all an ape. And so, because those two are so different in terms of what you're looking for. If you're looking for a being that looks, acts, smells, poops like a gorilla, then you're going to have a certain expectation in your mind of what you're going to find. Versus if you're looking for a type of people, I think Sasquatch are people. I made an image. I should have uploaded it to show you guys before the show, but to illustrate this point, I made an image of, thanks to AI, of a large Scandinavian man standing next to a pygmy. And if you put those two together, you would say they're from different planets. That's not even the same species. Yet they're both Homo sapiens, both human, they just look completely different from one another, as far apart as you could get and still be human. Well, to me, that opens the idea that Sasquatch is a different type of person, much larger, much hairier, much more muscular. But there's so many things about them that they walk on two legs the majority of the time. They live in family groups. They have a language that's a real language, just like English. We just don't understand what they're saying. They interact with us at a highly intelligent level. They do not behave like a gorilla. They do not interact with us like a gorilla would. There's so many things about them but there's a huge division, and you'll find experts on either side calling one another out in public at conferences. And I'm like, really? All that does is cause the rest of the world, the skeptical world, to look at the Bigfoot world and say, yeah, all of you are kooks, all of you. And this is just proving that point that you don't even agree with each other. I may not agree with somebody who has a different perspective, but listen, there's no expert in this world until someone can say, I have a Sasquatch in captivity, or I have a body of a Sasquatch. Then we're all trying different theories to understand the way they are. And so I can't say I know more than someone else when that may not be the case. They may know something that I have never even heard or thought about. So, but politics is huge, as is the divisions between these organizations. And it's unfortunate because I think, and we tend to be very territorial. And so I'll have my body of research and it's like, this is mine and you can't have it and you can't see it. If we would just share the information that we have, throughout the Bigfoot community, we would be so much farther ahead. But everyone's holding on, either wanting to be the ones to come forward with the great discovery and be known that. But I've tried to get other people to share. I try to be very open about, I sell maps in my store of all the locations in my county where people have seen a Bigfoot, heard a Bigfoot, and they'll come and say, hey, tell me some trails where I can go. And I say, here's a map, go. But other groups are like, no, I'm not going to tell you anything. It's like, why? What's the point? I do get not wanting to share. If I have a sensitive area where I'm maybe doing gifting with a Sasquatch family, and I just don't want a bunch of people going through there, I get not sharing that information, but not sharing anything about what I have learned, that's just foolish. And it just means that none of us have the big picture, and we could if we would just share the information.
Very well put, dear Jim. I know that controversy and different points of view run within the UFO world as well, and
I'm sure
that. How about politicians? What any support or any collaboration with? I'm thinking of recently. I forgot the gentleman that we had on last time, Alex. LeBlanc, was it?
Yeah, Ronnie.
Ronnie. Yeah, Ronnie brought up an interesting point that that a Native American representative was appointed to a very high position, and that she was basically had a separate a meeting with a group of Native Americans to talk specifically about Bigfoot.
I'm not aware of any prominent politicians that. Now, there may be politicians who believe in Sasquatch, but there's not that I'm aware of any that are coming public with that information. There are some academics, Jeff Meldrum being one case, others who have been willing to risk their reputation and their jobs to make their belief of a Sasquatch public, and I admire that. But politicians, not that I'm aware of. I think there's a lot of anecdotal evidence that the military is aware of them and have encounters with them. Certainly the military, because of the ability of our satellites to see, we can't have the satellites that we have and not have data about Sasquatch. We have to have it. It has to be out there. It's just not being made public.
Yeah, but it's all a very interesting topic, and I'm glad to see the crossover. Jim, you mentioned you had spoken to Colorado MUFON, and that's always great to have speakers like yourself.
Great group, and we share some things in common in that much of the world considers all of us crazy. So we at least can commiserate on we're not necessarily respected by everyone, but I enjoy speaking to the MUFON group because I get great questions because we're already out there, so to speak, in the things that we're trying to do research about. So very much enjoyed that.
Well, very good. Do you have any are you speaking anywhere this season?
A few places. I don't really have an interest in getting on the public speaking circuit. I have too much I want to do here. I'll be speaking. I'll be doing a podcast from Bigfoot Days in Estes Park next month. I'll be also speaking at a conference along with Jeff Meldrum here in Colorado in May. For an organization called Bigfoot Investigative Group. I may have one or two other opportunities further down in the summer, but those are two that are here in Colorado, which suits me fine. It's easy to get to those locations, and I don't have to get on a plane to stay in a hotel. So.
Very exciting. No, I want to make it up to the Estes Park Festival as well this year. I've read about that for a few years now, and it always sounds like it's a great time.
It's a lot of fun. We have a booth there, and we are swamped all day long by people wanting to buy Bigfoot paraphernalia, clothing, souvenirs. Yeah, it's a lot of fun.
Well, if I make it up there, Jim, I'll have to come and find your booth.
Absolutely. You won't be able to miss us. Trust me.
Well, great. Well, Jim, thank you so much for joining us today. It's been a pleasure learning more about the outpost. Again, I'll have to make my way out that way as well. Any of our listeners who are in Colorado, make sure to make your way out to Bailey or to Estes Park this summer.
Let's see if we could order items on the website.
Yes, you can. You can order most of the things we have in our shop on that site there, SasquatchOutpost.com. There's a whole online store, so feel free to go check it out.
Awesome.
Excellent.
Great, Jim. Great to have you.
Thank you guys for having me on. I really appreciate it.
Thank you all for joining us, and we will see you again in 2 weeks. Take care.
Bye-bye.